And so the title is The Tip of the Spear. We started out with Judge Hobbs. He laid the groundwork of what's happened, what's come before us. And it hasn't been easy on any generation, and we're no different. Whoa, we're going way too fast. Okay. And I guess it's important for us to know that a lot of smart people came before us and laid a groundwork with the intent of maintaining a civil society. And also it's important to remember that in 1942, laws were put in place, regulations were put in place for us before most of us were born, and we're obliged to live up to those obligations. When it comes to the compact, Dick and Scott and Tim, I think, did a really good job of telling us where we are. We're not out of the woods, but we've done everything as a district that we can to enable them to complete a job in the courts. I don't know what else we could do. We've done everything they've asked us to do, so right now they're going forward as fast as they can to get us conclusion. Meanwhile, we're looking at the next chapter. Oops. You've seen this map before today. I really like this map because it overlays the Republican Basin with the Ogallala Aquifer. And it's a tale of two issues. We've got the issue of compliance, and we've got the issue of saturated thickness. They're very different, but they're related. Compliance has to do with compacts. It has to do with these things we call state lines. When there's lots of water, there's no problem. But when water gets short, those state lines become battle lines. And Colorado hates Nebraska, Nebraska hates Kansas, Kansas hates Nebraska, Kansas hates Colorado, and we're all fighting over what we think is our fair share. But all of that fighting doesn't put any water in the saturated thickness. That's a different story. That's a different argument. That's a different case. And you know, after looking at Catherine and Brad's presentations, you know, I don't think the grass is greener on the other side of the battlefield. I think they've got the same problems that we do. I really, really wish we could have gone to a point where we could have solved this problem as a basin instead of state by state by state, but as the question was answered by Judge Hobbs, that was really pretty much impractical with the concept of compacts. Hydrology. Jim Slattery does an amazing job of bringing science to assumption. You can go to Jim with an assumption and say, Jim, I think this is what's going to work here, and he'll just destroy it with science, or he'll back it up with science. And he's super knowledgeable when it comes to the compact. And this is one of Jim's slides you've seen today too. And if you look at this, if we win in our compact compliance issues, we have 13,000 acres or 13,000 acre feet of water to deal with the compact pipeline. That, if you project what this line looks like, it gets us out over 30 years. So if we win in court, then we've got the compliance issue solved for quite a while. Now, what about the saturated thickness issue? That's a different story. That's where it comes down to the economy. Time is not our friend. There's a lot of people down in the south end of the basin that will say that, 20 years ago I had 800 acre feet or 800 gallons per minute in my well, and today those are under 3, maybe 2. I know that we've been here for going on 40 years, and up until 2012, the Holy Joe Creek north of town flowed every day. In 2012, it ceased. It sodded over. And I don't know that it'll ever flow again. So nobody's immune. It affects everybody. There's no question about it. And I think it's important to know that to date, every decision that's been made has been based on keeping the economic engines of our small communities strong and not trying to separate out one small community at the expense of another. And I think to date we've been successful. That is going to be harder as we go down the road. Corey talked about unity, about getting involved, and all of us staying unified in the goal of keeping our economies and our rural way of life strong. And I want to give you an example of what we've faced to date and maybe what we're going to face more in the future. You know, I live down in the south end of the basin, and I'm telling you, I've got 20 foot left in my aquifer, in my well. And after that 20 foot's gone, what am I going to do? Well, I'm here to tell you, I've had to re-drill 4 of my stock wells in the last year. And I don't have any high-capacity wells. That's not my problem. I shouldn't have to re-drill those wells, and somebody should pay me if I have to. Well, I'm just telling you, I have got a lot of money invested in equipment and sprinklers and land, and the only way I can make this work, if I get a return on my investment, I have got to stay at full speed. I cannot cut back. My favorite place in the world was Bonnie Reservoir. I mean, my kids and my wife and I, we'd go down there. That was our life, and you guys dried it up. How can I get it back? I've got kids. I've got kids that I want to have this lifestyle. I want them to be able to farm. If we don't save our water, if we don't do something, it's going to be gone, and I guess we're going to have to move out of here and learn how to dryland farm. I don't know. Well, I'm here to tell you, I've got state-issued water permits that give me the right to pump water, and if anybody says I can't pump my state-given right, you'll be talking to my lawyer. Well, I just came from the city council meeting last night, and it looks like our next well for any additional water for our municipality is going to have to come from like, 10 miles away? How is that going to work? There you have it. There's some real-life examples that have already happened. And I'd have to say that, which of those statements is valid? They're all valid. Every one of those stories is a real-life story that has consequences to somebody. Everybody has their own hat on, but can we listen to somebody else as we go forward? So, what's the point? There's been a good contingent of people in the basin that have asked for conservation. In fact, yelled and screamed for conservation for 10 years. And it's not that they haven't been listened to, because we've done a lot of conservation, not the district necessarily, but as a society, there's a lot of things that we've already done. You know, as far as high impact sprinklers, as far as low pressure, as far as drops, as far as farming practices from conventional tillage to minimum tillage to strip till to no-till, to soil probes, remote monitoring of sprinklers. And then we get into the district's functions as far as permanently retiring ground, to actually the well field to the north and drying up Bonnie to the south. Both of those have conservation impacts. There's just a ton of things we have done. But as Jim stated, it's not going to keep us in compliance. That graph that showed the 13,000 acre feet, unless we can get that thing to flatten out at some way, then this problem will just keep on haunting us in the future. So what should conservation look like? You guys have a lot of you have filled out a survey already. And if you haven't filled it out, I strongly encourage you to do that. Is conservation going to be like it has been in the past? Is it going to be all voluntary with some education? Is it going to be incentive-driven with education? Is it going to include restrictions, and what will those restrictions look like? Or is it going to be a combination of all of the above or none of the above? Are we going to continue on the same plane we have with picking off some conservation as we go forward and doing the best we can, and then when the water's gone, the water's gone? And understand also, I think it was stated once earlier today, that the Republican River District has no authority to restrict water pumping. We do have the authority to assess the $14.50 an acre water use fee. And if you look around the state, I know there's been some people saying that that's not equitable, but if you look around the state, that is so cheap for the privilege to irrigate. And you can look at Brad's slides and say, ooh, this could be a lot worse. So we've managed to keep all the irrigators in the same kind of basket, so there's not a lot of infighting. I don't know that we can continue down the road and avoid all infighting, but we can certainly minimize it. The results of the survey will all be posted on the Republican River website, and so you'll get to see that. And if the survey shows a strong tendency in one direction, the Republican River Water Conservation District will kind of facilitate that direction designated by the people in the survey. And we'll just have to see how those results come back. But for those people who have been wanting conservation, today should be a good day for you, because that is going to be the focus going forward, that what can we do to satisfy the people that in our basin. And if you say, hey, we don't want to touch anything, then I suppose that's what's going to happen. I want to close with a statement and a question. The statement is, nature will demand sustainability and equilibrium. The question, and do we want to work with nature to maintain our economic engines for our communities for a viable future? And the question is really, can you put on somebody else's hat so we can stay unified in this process going forward? That's a tough one, but it requires all of us to take off the hat that we wear and put on somebody else and say they have a point too. Okay? So with that, I think we're ready to start with the panel discussion and have the question and answer session. I think Dennis and Aaron, are you going to help out with that one?